Welcome. I'm Rami Khouri from the Media Studies program at AUB. We're delighted for this episode of the AUB Beirut COVID-19 Briefings to have as our guest the Dean of the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences, Dean and Professor Rabi Mohtar, one of the leading experts in this field in the Arab world. And we will be talking about food, agriculture, water, energy, and all the related issues in that universe, which is now becoming quite complex and quite frightening in many respects, as he will explain to us. We'll go to New York a couple of times, and Alison Freeland there from the AUB office will have questions from the audience, and we will start right now. Thank you so much for being with us, Dean Mohtar. One of the most striking things that I've seen recently in Lebanon and the region is young kids, 18, 20-year-old young people in Tripoli, facing off against the police and saying, "We're hungry, we're hungry." And they don't care about the COVID-19, they don't care about the curfew. They're out in the streets, they're not afraid of the police, and they're saying, "We're hungry." So this incredible combination of personal activism and dynamism and whatever you want to call it, courage or recklessness or fearlessness, combined with the fact that they're saying we're hungry. Yes. So in your field, what does this mean? How do we interpret this, and where should we start looking for answers?
Thank you, Rami. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the conversation. That's true, and it has a lot of reality, but I'd like to take a step back. I'd like to engage a wider audience in setting some kind of overarching issues. You mentioned something very important. Hunger, food security are on everybody's mind. I'd like to remind all of us that food security, agriculture, food is not the agriculturist and the nutritionist and the landscape ecologist problem. It's a societal problem. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to invite all of us to engage in this discussion. Food security and hunger, preventing hunger, and having us more food secure is not only a farming discipline. Right. It's a discipline that involves engineering, technology, big data, health professionals, supply chain, policy, politics, all of that.
And commercial markets.
And commercial market. Oh. So I'd like to have a call for everybody to be involved in this, because it's not only the agriculturalists and the producers who are supposed to be making our nation more secure, and any nation, as a matter of fact. So that multiplicity of disciplines required to achieve that food security goal is very, very important to realize. The other thing that I'd like to really maybe follow up to this, and before I start digging into your question, mm-hmm. is that the issue, you hear a lot of misperception about food security, food sovereignty, and self-sufficiency. Mm-hmm. I'd like to really make those distinctions very, very clearly. Mm-hmm. When we talk about a nation is food secure, it does not mean, and not necessarily mean, that we have a nation that produces all of its food. But there has to be a means for securing access, and access meaning availability, but also price of food. Right. So those issues need to be clarified right from at the front. Lebanon, and I'm sure we're going to be digging a little bit more on that, has decided a long time ago that we're not going to be a food secure country, mm-hmm. and we're not going to focus on agriculture, and we're going to rely primarily on food import. And that's what we see today. The hunger is a realization of bad policies, all of the bad things that could happen are happening today. All the stars align in a negative way. The COVID has really expedited the food insecurity, the crisis issue. Economics is what everybody's mind. And because of our reliance on food import, and also not only for the food as a commodity, but also the supply chain that supports farming. The seeds, the fertilizer, the agro industry relies on import of all of these technologies. So it's not only the commodity that we import as wheat, as red meat, but also the whatever is left from our our food that we produce domestically is relying on technologies that are imported. And because of the lack of currency, hard currency, we're not able to the essentials for producing that food, and we're also importing at premium cost the bare essential. So what you just said, it's absolutely true. It has a lot of reality to it. All what it takes is for you to go to the grocery store and see the inflammatory prices. We're not talking about twice, 3 times. Sometimes for commodities, we're talking about much more than that. And there's a lot of people taking advantage of those. So the people shouting we're hungry, yes, they are. A lot of people are hungry. We have unemployment is reaching 50%. It's expected to. We haven't. I don't think we've hit rock bottom yet.
Right.
We're going to be seeing more, unless there is immediate action to stop that through subsidies, through some relief effort, which we haven't seen. We have seen a little bit of it, but the government has not really done much to relieve that. And that's a political discussion that I don't intend to get into.
Okay, well, I'll talk about politics. You talk about agriculture. So this is a issue that is so multisectoral.
Yeah.
Virtually every dimension of life, technology, weather,
absolutely,
liberal economies, pricing, government policies, consumption patterns, education, virtually every dimension of life feeds into this sector. And now it's a very depressed sector.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, governments take the responsibility for this. And if they're not doing a good job, as they're not doing in many of the Arab countries, not all of them, but many of them, what happens then for institutions like yourself, where you have some of the smartest people in the teaching and in your students, and a great tradition behind you, a lot of credibility. So how do you start dealing with this as a profession, trying to deal with agricultural and food sciences, while there's people in the street fighting the police saying we're hungry?
Many dimensions to your question. I will start with the first dimension that you mentioned, the role of government. The government had made a bet many years ago that agriculture is not important. So they invested in other sectors. Right. They invested in housing, in real estate, they invested in the banking sector, they invested in the tourism. Agriculture was not on anybody's plan. And as such, we're suffering today from the hunger because of those poor planning, because the bet that we lost. We realized too late that, in fact, the discussion we had several months ago, right after the Thawra in October, when we realized that the country is broke, it cannot really secure neither the import of food nor providing the technical support and the technical need for farmers to produce. I'll give one example, potato seeds. Potato is a staple food for the Lebanese, and yet we import potato seeds from Holland and other locations to grow them. So if we don't have the hard currency to import these expensive in today's Lebanese lira devaluation, we cannot produce. So it's a double jeopardy. You're not unable to bring in fresh food ready for consumption, nor you can produce enough of it. So what do we do? I think that there many of us are really putting double the effort. In some, at FAFS, we have units that are doing community engagement. ESDU, as an example, has been very engaged in distributing mouni. Mouni is the Arabic word for food, traditional food. They're actually over, my last count was over 1,500 of these mouni units that will last several months for each family. So there are some donors, there are some contributors to this fund that allow FAFS and AUB to engage at some level with direct food aid. The World Food Program is very much engaged. Many entities are doing that, and as you could see, that is happening, but not happening at the large scale that we expect. The other dimensions that we're trying to be engaged is to really revitalize that sector. There's lack of extension support. I mean, as we were talking earlier, there is an extension service that is lacking in this country. So farmers are left alone to consultation by private sector on chemicals, agrochemicals, on industrial type machinery. There is no systematic support for this sector. So we are trying to work with all of the above to really help revitalize that sector and more or less bring it back from the ashes, because that sector has been ignored for so many years. Lots to be done. The journey ahead is long, but we have already started. There are a lot of engagement with the private sector, engagement with the public sector, engagement with the donor. There are some funds that will be made available. Some of it has already been made available to support that sector, but we need to act and act swiftly.
It seems that the relative share of the population that works in farming or lives off farming has been declining steadily, so now it's about a quarter of the population?
That's true, and a lot of it is subsistence farming, people who are actually suffering the most. So part of I go back to the model that I'd like to see us working on, is part of the model is to really, you mentioned earlier some of the hunger. What happens today in these hungry and in economic crisis is that we shortcut many of the diet. We shortcut a lot of what we eat. So let's keep focus on one issue, that it's not only we wanna feed the hungry. We wanna feed them with the right nutrition. We want to make sure that we don't deviate much from the traditional Mediterranean diet that is healthy for you, tend to be cheaper, but more importantly, it supports local production.
Yeah.
So we need to look at this as a system, not only from the consumption, but also from the production side, to really support these small subsistence farmers and engage with them so that they can be back into as an economic engine, gradually back into economic engine, scale up some of what we know. And we can maybe talk about this later.
Yes.
Investment in agriculture is not there.
Right.
Some of it is policy related, some of it is lack of trust in the sector. This needs to happen to scale up the agriculture that we see at the farm, at the small scale, to make up a larger portfolio. We need, at the end of the day, we need to have a trade balance. What we import is 85% of our diet.
Wow.
We need to have a balance between what we import, what we export. Some of the niche areas that we maybe we'll talk about it later, we need to develop what is good for us. I mean, let's embrace our geography, let's embrace our climate, let's embrace what we have the skills, our soils, and let's develop niche market that we can really improve our export and have a healthier trade balance when it comes to food. And that goes back to the issue that I mentioned earlier. What do we mean by food security?
Right.
It's not producing it all local, but let's talk about a trade balance that allow us to produce enough of high cash crop, high cash commodity that we can export, and in return bring back some of the things that we cannot produce here.
And this should be relatively easy to do given the wealth around us in the region.
I mean, I wouldn't say easy to do. There are a lot of geopolitical issues.
No, I meant easy to do in the sense that there are markets that will buy
Absolutely.
good quality
But
product.
I'd like to highlight here, we're diving into some really planning that was never done. At the end of the day, this country, our beloved country, has some good water resources. I don't say abundance, but some good water resources.
Yes.
We have abandoned practices that has been abandoned for years. So rain-fed agriculture is a practice our ancestors planted without irrigation. So we need to really need to look at the portfolio of what we can do with the resources that we have, and that planning has not been done.
Right.
The other portfolios of really reuse, I mean, look at food waste. Before the COVID, before the economic crisis, we wasted 50% of the food we acquire, either produced or imported.
Yeah.
That culture needs to change. And there are a portfolio of solutions that needs to be looked at. But we have to start that planning process.
We have some questions from New York. Allison?
Yes, and Dean Mohtar, you have people online from Berlin and San Diego, Lebanon, Cornell, Houston. You have a fellow Aggie online, Indiana, Oregon, Somalia, Mexico. So we have a big group, and I'd like to encourage people to put their questions that they can ask you. And I think we have a nephew of yours online as well, and some people who know your work and your real interest in the water, food, energy nexus. And a couple are asking about how your system of the water, food, energy nexus can help with the Lebanese government right now, especially in this time of COVID.
Greetings to all. I wish I could see you all. I'm happy that you're all connected, took the time to be with us. It's a very important question. For those who may not have had the chance to really know what the question is about the water and energy food nexus, it's a new approach, a system approach to looking at resource management. And the idea stemmed back in 2011. Rami, you and I were talking about the World Economic Forum. Back in 2011, we started an initiative within the water security that we've been talking to each other. And each of these resources is connected to that bigger system. I'll give an example. In Lebanon, even though we don't produce a lot of the food we consume, but agriculture is about 60 to 65% of the fresh water goes to agriculture. Wow. Which means that if we want to talk about food security and increasing that local domestic food production in Lebanon, we cannot but look at the water resources. About 30% of the energy here in Lebanon goes to agriculture, whether it's in tillage, whether it's in electrification, transport. All of these resources are interconnected. So they need to be looked at as an interconnected system. And this is what the water, energy, food nexus comes in the picture, where we don't want to optimize silos. We want to optimize the system. And when we look at new technology, we need to look at this in a lens that look at that holistic view of this interconnected system. I'll give one example. If we wanted to produce, for example, there could be a mandate to produce more wheat. Without looking at the water footprint and the implication of the more wheat production on the water supply, domestic water supply, on the other energy supply in the country, we should not be looking at this in a unidirectional. So any planning need to look at this holistic view of resource mobilization and resource management. So this is what the Nexus can offer. It can offer a platform where one resource goal we could look at before implementing it, look at the implication of the whole other system, and that's what this Nexus can offer the government. We have lots of successful examples. The last one is in Texas, actually, where we look at in the entire state of Texas, focusing primarily on San Antonio, and look at this competition of water between the energy sector, the domestic water supply, and agriculture. And unless you really have a coherence in this decision making, there will be losers and there will be winners. And we want to make sure the winner would be society and not individual sectors.
So you use the term coherence in decision making. Do you have any indication from the new government that we have in Lebanon? Are they more aware of this problem now? Has the economic collapse and the economic fragility of our country in Lebanon here caused the government to be more willing to look at the bigger picture solutions?
Honestly, I don't see it yet. And the reason I'm saying that is when I had the chance to look at and comment on the agriculture plan, the word water doesn't exist there. Wow. And the intersectoral implementation doesn't exist. The Ministry of Finance, I mean, all of these, if we want to implement a food security in Lebanon, it does require interfaces with the finance, with the planning. It does interface with the energy ministry, with the water ministry, so that it allows for these resources to be made available for the agriculture sector. Looking at the agriculture plan, I don't see that interconnectedness. We must look at this as a coherent plan. Otherwise, we will be competing rather than working together synergistically to achieve that goal.
So if we stay in this situation, will we essentially see the global private market network of exporters, producers, middlemen, commission agents take over the whole process of producing, transporting, selling, and distributing food?
I mean, to a big extent, this is what's happening. And there's no regulation on the prices. There's no regulation on protecting the local domestic producers. I mean, we've seen stories and we've read stories about potato farmers. Their produce would go to waste because of the competition from outside. And those examples exist in every single sector within the agriculture commodity supply chain. So there need to be a platform to really develop a protection system, some form of a plan that allow us to look at these resources as a bundle. So whatever plan we have takes into consideration the interconnectivity of that system.
Mm-hmm. The ultimate impact of this, of course, is that people are hungry, and then people are experiencing declining nutritional levels. Their physical capacity to live a decent life is declining. Do you have evidence of this in your research?
Absolutely, and let me point out on a couple things. And you raised a very important question, which is nutrition. We need to evolve into a system. When we talk about food security, it's about nutrition security. It's not about the calories you eat. It's the quality of the nutrition that you eat. And I'd like to emphasize the great work that's been done at the Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences in the nutrition aspect, and the adherence. We must adhere to our traditional diet, the Mediterranean diet, for many reasons. And let's talk about it. First, it is native, so it allows us to really utilize local resources. It allows us to really get back to the production and support these small farmers. But more importantly, it's healthy for you.
Yes.
And it has evidence in the last Lancet Eat report. It is healthy for you. Last but not least, it's healthier for the environment.
Wow.
So it's good for you, good for the environment, good for the farmers, good for the supply chain, and good for the economic engine for this country to move. And I think this is very important. Now, let me go back to your earlier question. Is everybody adhering to that? Absolutely not. Because of the market is flooded with not necessarily the right thing to eat. So we have to be very careful about what we choose in the market, how we design our diet so that we can better adhere to the Mediterranean diet. Everybody has access to the food? Absolutely not. I mean, we talked about earlier, over the last report that I read, 50% of Lebanese are now unemployed. And those are unemployed. Unemployed. And those who are employed, all of a sudden, overnight, they lost 1/4, they had their devaluation. Their currency is now 1/4 of what it used to be, which means that, are they able to maintain the good, healthy diet that they used to have? I don't think this is possible with all of the pressures that we see. So immediately we need to have a safety net for the Lebanese and the poorest of them. And I think this is something that we've heard a lot of talks about this, and it needs to happen. It definitely needs to happen. This needs to happen today. As we move forward in the coming month, we need to have a plan to really try to see what we can produce locally within that Mediterranean diet, and what is it that we must import. And those discussions has started. We have a lot of plans. We've got a lot of discussions within our faculty, within our colleague, with other faculty of agriculture in Lebanon. There's a lot of these plans that can be implemented, but we need to start. And I think the funding for it need to come immediately so that we can mobilize the short-term food aid using Mediterranean diet, using the local production, so that you can actually grease the skid, as they say, for the local production, allow those small farmers to get back into business, provide them with the market in these Mooney food boxes, and then as that is done, the next phase needs to be planned, where to plant, what to plant, and the whole mapping of our resources, the soil, the water resources, the ingredients of the Mediterranean diet map. We can do this, and we have to do it.
So from your experience, many years, decades in agricultural science and food sciences, what is it that brings about a change in a government's policy? If we have a government here or in other countries that is not doing a very good job in this sector, what happens to make them change? Where does that pressure actually have an impact? I mean,
I cannot speak about the Lebanese experience. I've been here for a couple of years, but I can tell you that a lot of changes happened in the US back in 2008 and that was triggered by energy crisis, that was triggered by the dependency of water, food, and water. So I remember that happened when the decision was made to increase the fuel pump to have 10% of ethanol.
Yes.
The corn prices went way up. That triggers a lot of, in fact, I remember those, I was in a class and I made that statement. It's triggered by shocks, and I think we're seeing that shock.
Right.
How can this shock be triggered into policy? In Lebanon, anything can go.
Well,
and we really need to translate that shock into policy change, into investing in this sector, because
right.
people are hungry.
Right.
People are hungry. I mean, you started that, and people are hungry.
Right. Alison in New York?
Yes, we have a question about, do you see any encouraging initiatives for planting right now? And perhaps you could also mention AREC and what is going on there.
Thank you.
And explain what AREC is.
AREC is I used to call it, when I was here, the Agricultural Research and Education Center. Now it's Advancing Community, and I don't recall the exact acronym. I apologize for that. Anyway, AREC is AUB Farm. AREC is the place where we all grow to love, and we continue to have a lot of affection. It's the 1 million square meter of research, education, engagement facility for the entire AUB community. AREC now has transformed from an agriculture, education, research center into an engagement center for the entire AUB campus. It's housing WAFRA. We'll talk about WAFRA later. It's the Water, Energy, Food, Health Initiative. It's housing many other research activities. So I really look forward June 1st for our cohort of students from engineering, the internship, and from the Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences to be at AREC to resume their field practicum. The question was raised about are there any encouraging signs? Absolutely, absolutely. What keeps us going is a lot of interest in agriculture. Unlike many disciplines, if you ask a pharmaceutical company or an IT tech company working on a patent that a competitor is coming in line, that you could see a rage of competition. That's not the case in our discipline. We're really delighted that everybody, all music channel, everybody's talking about agriculture, and this is music to our ear. Everybody's talking about food security. We have been responding to numerous requests from investors wanting to invest in agriculture. In fact, AUB is engaged at the moment with several of these requests to start large-scale food security projects. We do have, I think we have the soils, we have the water resources, we have the technologies, we have the skills to make this happen. It's going to take some time to get those plans meet the demand for the country. And again, the idea is not to meet all of the food basket, but the idea is to look at what out of these food baskets we can produce domestically, and what we would import based on a healthy trade balance. And I think that discussion needs to happen. It's starting, a lot of interest from the private sector, and we're going to be engaging more. We look forward to more of those engagements to look at a national platform. How can we get investment in the sector so that it can really meet the national needs?
One of the things that we've learned in the last 3 months with the COVID-19 pandemic at AUB and in the country as a whole has been the urgent need for multisectoral collaboration.
Yep.
So in AUB, there's a committee of about 12 professors and experts from different faculties, all working together, meeting every day, and they're meeting daily with people in the private sector, in the government hospitals and NGOs. So from what you described, the food, agriculture, water, energy nexus also links to currencies, foreign exchange rates, liberal trade policies, all kinds of sectors of life. So you need to put
Absolutely.
Together a big multisectoral team. Is this something that you're thinking about doing within AUB to start with perhaps and then expand it?
Thank you. You give me I was looking for the opportunity to introduce WAFRA. WAFRA, for the non-Arabic speaking, is abundance. And we believe that abundance comes from synergy. So WAFRA stands for Water, Energy, Food, Health, Nexus. It's an initiative across AUB. All of the faculties are involved in that. We've got about 56 faculty members involved in 10 projects. All of those are at AREC that look into different technologies, different anthropological studies, different economic models to allow for answering few questions. One, understand and untangle the complexity of the water, energy, food, health. Understand that complexity. Second, which is more important, is to reduce the interdependency. I'll give an example. I just talking to you earlier how much you like photosynthesis. I'll dig a bit more on photosynthesis because I do love photosynthesis.
Yeah.
How much of the water that goes into the photosynthetic process goes into carbohydrate? You remember?
I don't. This
Very
was in high school.
Few percentage.
Yeah.
Few.
Yeah.
How much we, as a society globally, we put water to produce food? 2/3 of our water.
Wow.
So see the discrepancy. So imagine in a world down the road where we go approaching the theoretical limit in weaning food production from water. Imagine a world that we wean our economic development from energy. Imagine a world that we wean these resources. So if you've got one catastrophe in drought, for example,
Right.
it doesn't trickle into other catastrophes in food insecurity and other insecurities. So this it's a small scale projects that are conducted at ERIC, but the long-term effort is to really look at this synergy. We've got all the faculties representative, we've got biologists, we've got engineers, we've got big data, we've got agriculturists, we've got anthropologists,
Wow.
policymaker, communication specialists, education specialists, all of them, sustainability specialists, nurses, we have health sciences, all of them working towards that goal. How do you untangle the system, understand these interlinkages, and allow you to wean each other, these resources from each other? And the end goal is resilience. Once we understand these interlinkages, when we decouple or understand these interdependencies, we'll be more resilient. And that's the idea.
Are there countries in the region or in the world where you can say they've actually done this successfully? It sounds like an incredibly ambitious...
We started this discussion back maybe in 2011, 2012 in Qatar. Some activity happened there. Today, AUB is working with other countries in the region to implement some of these plans. I think once I'm not ready to disclose those because they're still in the,
Right.
not in a disclosable state, but 2 other countries in the region, AUB is leading that effort to
right.
discuss these system approaches. But that leads me to why we're doing this. If something that we didn't talk about is the Sustainable Development Goals,
Right.
which for me, aspirational goals to really help us move the needle forward. It's hard to believe that we talk about Sustainable Development Goals in this moment when we're dealing with economic crisis, when we're dealing with COVID. It is the right time to talk about this because our resilience to overcome the economic crisis, to overcome the health implications. If you look at COVID, it is by itself, it's a nexus of health, food insecurity, how we interface, it's economic, and it's the interface between human and Mother Nature.
Right.
So all of these are elements that are at the bigger scale related to our ability to achieve nationally and as a state the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's very much connected to that discussion. And I think we need to be aspired to move forward with a system approach to achieving, because we cannot solve these problems unilaterally.
Right.
And I can tell you that a vaccine specialist cannot solve COVID alone. They
Right.
need nutritionists, they need medical expertise, they need economists, they need a society as a whole. And
Right.
those are the solutions, very complex, do not have single disciplines as a solution for them.
Allison in New York.
We have a lot of questions now, and I know we're nearing the end, so they won't all get answered. But I'm wondering if for people who are outside of Lebanon, you have anything you can say to them about ways they might help or contribute to these initiatives from afar.
Thank you. Very good question. There are many. I'll be happy to engage with you offline. And I think one of the things that during this crisis that I personally very keen on is not to lose our positioning globally. So we need you, we need to continue engaging with you. Our mobility has been limited for many, many reasons. This connectivity and ties with whether it's a research tie, whether it's a support for a Mooney box, or whether it's support for a student, or whether it's support for our ability to continue serve our students, our faculty, and our stakeholders. One thing unique about FAFS is that we do have an engagement strategy working with our producers, working with our small businesses to promote the agriculture sector. So support in these areas is very, very critical today. We'll be happy to take specific ways in which you can engage, but we need all of you to support that effort, and we'll be grateful to engage with all of you in ways that you can support and you can help.
Perhaps, Dean Mohtar, we could put you on the chat at some point and have you answer some of the specific questions, and you'll see what's coming in from around the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Please keep those. I will be requesting the chat, and I'll be happy to respond to each one of them in a way that we can continue that dialogue beyond the time that we have here today.
Or do a Zoom session and people can discuss these things together.
Yes, yes, yeah. One thing, because of these problems are so much interconnected, there's no one sector can do it alone. If one thing that I personally learned over being in quarantine at AUB is that we really need all of us collectively to address these questions, because they're very complex and we don't want to look at them as a single silo approach. And all of us as a global family in support of AUB, in support of Lebanon, in support of FAFS, need to work together towards achieving those goals. And we can do it.
We only have a couple of minutes. Quick question. The agricultural, food, energy, of course, we waste billions, and not waste, but we spend billions on subsidizing electricity, and those things can be the engines of growth of a new revived economy in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Is there a mechanism, do you think, that this can be, we can heighten the appreciation of people throughout society who actually can make these decisions?
Thank you for asking that, because there was one key message I'd like to share, and I'm glad you asked that question.
That's the last one.
Thank you. There is one important lesson here that we need to really reflect on, and many of us are spending many hours at home, and it's time for us to really reflect. The business model we have is not sustainable for agriculture and maybe for other sectors as well. If I look for agriculture, it's good to be reflective, it's good to be critical. I think we were so good as a sector. We produced abundant food, but we've neglected a lot of issues. We've neglected our interaction with the environment. We've neglected the connectivity of one health, human health, ecosystem health, in addition to the bottom line. And we were very much focused on productivity and production. So one message that to kind of reflect on what you just said, yes, we can. However, we need to really have a deep look at changing our business model so that it can be sustainable. The current business model is not sustainable. Was only looking at for the profit, and it made us a lot of money. It made us have excess food in many places and not enough in many others. Right. We need to have a kind of a democratization of the food system. We need to look at dissecting it and making sure that we look at the three pillars of sustainability: the social, human factors, economics, as well as the environmental and ecosystem health. Right. And I think without those, we will fail. We failed in the past recognizing that. And I could give you the Litani River, for example, is one example here home. Polluted water is a non-accessible water. If you map the entire resources of us here in Lebanon, most of that water, groundwater, surface water, is all polluted. Wow. What that tells me, that water is not accessible. I cannot access it without energy that is used for cleaning it. The point here is, yes, we can. We have a big opportunity, but we need to really assess the business model that we have to look at this sustainable model for the future of agriculture, and let agriculture be the pioneer. We polluted the world, but we can save the world. Let the farmers save the world.
And the engine of a new reborn economy.
I'm going to quote my good friend Tony Allen, who says, the farmers will save the world, and I agree with him.
Dean Rabi Mohtar, thank you so much for being with us. And
thank you.
This has been a great example of the amount of knowledge that we actually have, and knowledge combined with human compassion. Now we have to translate that into policy.
Thank you, Rami. Thank you all of the viewers all over the world. It was a pleasure having you all and interact. We'll be happy to continue that discussion offline. Thank you.
We will do that. And I want to just tell the viewers that next week we have another exciting episode where we continue to look at the issues around the pandemic. And we're going to be talking to Dr. George Saliba next week, who is the Director and Professor of the Farouk Jabr Center of Arabic and Islamic Science and Philosophy, who will tell us extraordinarily fascinating and important stories about the experiences with pandemics in Arab and Islamic history going back 1,000 years and more. So join us next week at the same time. Thank you, Dean Mohtar. Thank you, Alison. Thank you for the crew. And join us next week.
Thank you. Thank you.